Welcome to the Compass Conversations podcast. We're a community of professional peers who love learning with and from each other. In other words, we choose collaboration over competition. Every conversation here is organic. Even the opening topic isn't settled until 5 minutes before we hit record. And the rest is riffing off of each other's brilliance. Thanks for hanging out with us in a new paradigm of learning, teaching, and expansion, where presence and non-competitive conversation create the space to learn without having to be schooled. Please visit compassconversations.com to discover more about this peer community and to include yourself as a sponsor. Hello, and welcome to our next episode of Compass Conversations. I'm Carrie Lake, and today our conversation is with Jessica Whiteplume, Chris Adderson, Greta Franklin DeMatos, Jillian Kreinbring, and Joelle Dunlap. And as we do in each of the calls, I'm just going to open the conversation with our invocation that is the underlying essence and heart, the foundation that brings us all together in conversation. And that is, these conversations are shared from our sense of connection, camaraderie, and love. This community of peers is curious to learn from and with one another, living, learning, and leading by example. We're exploring together, acknowledging the interspecies family on this planet, while lovingly including ourselves in the family of life from the heart for the heart. So thank you all for being part of this today and just over time through the evolution of our beautiful experiment called Compass. Before we hit record today, we were playing with a couple of different themes. One is connection with the land and how that affects the way we live in the world. Obviously, connection with horses. Horses are the context that have brought us all together. But there's also so much interest in expanding our context to also include permaculture and what permaculture actually is, the idea of life in relationship with itself. But then again, as you know, just a couple minutes before we hit record here, we were noticing a theme about risk and exploring what is risky. Like what is it that humanity thinks is risky? What does nature think is risky? And the curiosity of how is this idea of risk potentially affected by deep connection or deep relationship? Do connection and relationship change our perception of what is risky and what we might be willing to walk toward that we perhaps wouldn't walk toward without a deep connection or a deep relationship, a recognition of a relationship? So that there's so many different places that we can, things we can speak to from each of our unique backgrounds, whether it's directly related to horses or the land or one another. So I'm just super curious where we're going to take this one. Joelle, I want to hand it over to you because you're kind of in this conversation of risk, perception of risk a lot with the work that you do and the people that you are with. So could you just sort of just lay out a little table for us to finger paint on here, just from your perspective? Talk about risk, connection, and relationship a little bit, and just give us a place to start.
Thanks. Gosh, I could talk about this a lot, so you might need to get the shepherd's hook out now.
All right, if I just start waving my hand. Like wrap it up, Joelle, right?
So I think what came up, when we were introducing ourselves, and that came up when we were really playing with what we might talk about today, is right, this perception of risk and how deep relationship affects that. And so what my organization does every day, all day, is we're called Square Peg Foundation, and it came out of this idea that forcing the fit, forcing someone to fit, or any being to fit into a mold, it not only doesn't work, but if you're trying to force a square peg into a round hole, the worst part is that you actually destroy the peg in trying to make that fit. And that resonated really deeply with me. My background is in racehorses, and the people we serve are neurodivergent, primarily autism, but also eating disorders. We work with our local county mental health association. And so time and time again, I get asked, why the heck would you put people who are struggling with neurodivergence with a racehorse, right? That there is a perception that a racehorse is highly reactive, big, emotionally and physically fragile. And the reality is, all of those things are true. Um, so I'm not going to argue that part, but then why would why would we choose to do that? And the thing is that a thoroughbred, in my experience, is not just a herd animal, but because of the way, and I'm going to use the pronoun he because most of our horses are geldings, and I refuse to use it, and they is just difficult. So anyway, so he is, the rules with the jockey club, a racehorse can't even be conceived unless a human is there to document it, which is a little twisted and pornographic in the scheme of things, but it means that that horse is in relationship with humans from the moment of conception. Most of them are highly valued, so they're bred at commercial farms. They're handled from the get-go. So a racehorse, very often, he's bred to give us everything on the track, and often he's asked for way too much, and most of our horses are injured. So they have been asked for everything, and they've given everything and then some. So I feel a karmic debt to at least support that animal, and thanking him for giving more than he actually had. So that generosity speaks to me. I think their stories speak to people who feel marginalized. But to the question of risk, oddly enough, I have to say that Americans are kind of getting okay with this notion of using thoroughbreds. I found more pushback in Ireland than I ever have anywhere else in the world. And the Irish racehorse is a brilliant, brilliant horse. And racing is so much a deep part of the culture in Ireland. And to be fair, the Irish sport horse is a brilliant horse. The Irish saddle horse is a brilliant. They are hardy, they are smart, they are strong. But there's racehorses everywhere. Like, they're part of the culture. And I was told over and over again out loud in shouting terms that I was crazy and irresponsible for doing what we do. And 20 years in, we've pretty much got a perfect safety record. And so how do we do it? And the answer is it's what we touched on earlier. It's relationship. You have to know your herd. They have to live as a herd, and they have to see you as part of their safety, as part of their relationship, as part of, they have to trust our staff. And I just find the breed to be tremendously trustful as a whole, particularly the ones who've been injured because they've had to turn to humans. So that's my short version of how and why we do what we do, and with whom being not just the people we serve, but the horses that we choose to use. So I'll leave it at that and give it back to the group if that's all right.
Yeah, thank you, Joelle. To me, when I hear you talking, I'm thinking, how people have different ideas of what relationship is. And, I can hear horse people saying, well, not everybody can have their horses live in a herd. I hear all of that. It's common sort of arguments from people in the horse world. That too is fair, because of course not everybody can have a herd of horses. But if we can, let's look at what relationship is, though. Like, even if you have one horse, or if you have horses inside fences, or if you have horses outside fences, how do you invite that relationship? What is a relationship? What is the trust that we're looking for? And I think that's a lot of the equestrian world is asking that question in a huge way right now, which is wonderful. To me, it always comes back to knowing yourself. Because how do I have a relationship if I'm not offering a relationship? I can't just push, like, we see people pushing a horse in a circle, trying to get a relationship, trying to get connection. That doesn't really work with humans. You can't really chase a human with a whip and say, okay, now connect with me, right? And then when we talk about the land, what is a relationship with the land? And how does that support us? So Greta, I'm going to turn it to you, because you've got a head start on most of us in that part of the conversation. And then Jess as well. I'd love to hear you speak to this part of it.
What a beautiful invitation for reflection. And Joelle as well, there's so much that you brought forth that I want to kind of pull forward and into my experience as well, because the being trusted and being trustworthy in relationship it requires enough self-awareness to know if you're a trustworthy being, right? And that in and of itself is where we have to start when we're talking about safety and the risk. Because now it's almost 2 years ago, I and my husband and I decided to do a long ride with our 1.5-year-old daughter and 4 of our horses across one of the wildest sections of Patagonia. And so in terms of risk, a lot of people would say, you're crazy, you're very irresponsible parents, you're doing something that's very dangerous, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, again, we know and knew so deeply the process and the feeling of regulation, of nervous system awareness, of being in relationship enough to know the stressors, to know cues, to know the language of the horses, to know the language of the land, to know the language of each other, that it wasn't risky from our perspective, because we knew that we would be able to feel if we were on the edge of something dangerous. And we knew that then we could take the right action. And so we could move through that whole journey without anxiety or this projection of risk being bad, and instead be fully embodying a relationship with the journey that trusted the fact that we live with our herd, we live with these horses know that we know how to attune to their bodies, and they also are attuning to ours. And so as a result, we are having that kind of invisible conversation. And while I believe we've got these kind of contexts or levels of how that relationship can be of service to the whole well-being, and for example, living in a herd is going to allow a higher level of well-being than if the horses don't live in a herd, and that's fundamental. However, you can still build that level of trust and authentic relationship, I believe, with, again, that inner attunement to first your own, what's happening in your body, and then that awareness of how the other horses or the land itself is communicating and giving you feedback about its well-being. And I'll pause because I'd also love to hear from everyone.
I'll jump in if it, and then Jessica. I think being an only child and being relatively untethered by my parents, I lived in the herd of horses because really the horses were my only friends. And then later in life, that experience really served me well because I spent 6 months living on top of a mountain in Oregon. And it was on a 2,500 acre ranch. And I was in charge of tending to a herd of 42 broodmares and foals, many of them handled and many of them not handled. And the whole project itself was for me to understand this herd of mares and foals on an individual basis, to be able to acknowledge individually what triggers there were for foals in the horse-human relationship. And we really look to Linda Tellington Jones's work as being able to recognize the nervous system in these foals. If some foals are very curious, some had a fear reaction, some foals would freeze, some foals would pin their ears and be a little protective of their bubble. And it was amazing to be immersed in that herd from 7 in the morning till 7 at night, day in and day out. And I think the risk is to not recognize the individualism of every single one of those sentient beings, as opposed to just looking at it as one monolithic group. You know, it's just a herd. It's so very, very much more than just a herd. There are social cliques within the larger herd. There's so much communication to be had and to be seen and to be experienced when you're within that group. It's so powerful and so moving. And it's almost as if you're just flowing together like a river. You move, it's constantly moving. And it always made me think of like my mother saying, you have to have eyes in the back of your head, because when you're immersed in the herd, you really do have like a 360-degree awareness of where you're at all the time. And, you know, if you're not in the present, that's a risk. You know, I can remember once looking at my phone, and then I just felt like my hairs went up in the back of my neck, and I turned around. Well, there was kind of a little bit of a disgruntled mare there. She's like, "You're a little too close to my baby." And, you know, and so there's the risk is not being present among a group of beings that are always present. And then to watch them navigate their routines of, you know, going to certain areas to graze, and in the paths they chose to follow back to water. Or, you know, it could be a beautiful sunny day and the grass is tall and blowing, and the babies are laying down or they're frolicking and playing. And it seems as if the mothers don't even know where the babies are, right? And then there's a sense of perceived danger. And just in a blink of an eye, every single mare knew exactly where every single foal was, or every single foal knew exactly where their mare was, or there was a friend, a mare, another one of the mare's friends that would watch out for another one of those foals. There was just so much. It was like being in the school of fish. There was just so much introspection and learning to be had from them, even about, you know, they never overgrazed one area. They would pick their choice places and leave it. And then it would seem like it would rain, and then they knew that would create growth again, and then they would go back to that place. And there's just there's just so many lessons to be learned about how they interacted with the earth for us humans to gather from. But we tend to just be so consumed by life that we miss the big red truck in the room. So yeah, that's my experience as it piggybacks on what you ladies have so graciously and beautifully shared already.
What is so such an honor to hear from all of you who are doing such great work, but more importantly, just, you can tell that everybody has gone through their process and sort of found themselves. And we're all still in progress, of course, but it's beautiful just to talk with people who have found beauty in the world and have found beauty in, their own selves, and then to in turn be able to share that. And I just love hanging out with you all. Such a treasure to have such friends. I thanks for inviting me to share, Carrie. Gosh, yeah, this just really has brought back a lot of memories for me. And then, it's a nice moment to reflect on. I really was drawn or kind of pinged an interest um, on the opening comments by Greta about, at the end there, she said something about practices or beliefs that used to be common and have shifted, and now those seem just so foreign, and I guess I kind of related to that somewhat, as far as I'm not sure, I'm still reflecting on it, but I noted that. And again, I really did have a lot of memories growing up, I grew up on the Pine Ridge Reservation, which is it's so many things. It's the poorest place in the United States, how many many years running, but also we have this amazingness, we have lands, which is, the most important thing. I mean, that was what I was taught before I could, go to school. It was like, your land is the most important thing. You will never, ever, 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 ever sell the land. Black Hills are not for sale is like the mantra that I got before anything. So within my family, it's not like all Indigenous families are the same, but within our family, that was that's always been, our foremost teaching, and the summation that I really like, one is that we don't inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. So that's definitely very, definitely as far as our teachings, but but the other resource that we have is the land. Even though we lost almost all of it, some of the reservations are still pretty big. Pine Ridge is the second largest, I think, after Navajo country. So my dad's place, our land is pretty far out there. I don't even know how to describe it, because there are some fences, but I was also taught to just kind of ignore them. My dad's fairly uncolonized. He just never was colonized. So we would go places and we'd just travel with a wire cutter. So we would just travel and cut the wire, go through, put it back together, and carry on, like that was just the norm. There were some fences, but they're pretty far. So our home pasture was maybe, I don't know, 10,000 acres. I don't know. I could never, on any given day, you could get up and not ever find your horses, which leads me to some of my most beautiful memories were just walking for days, not days, but, for good parts of a day to find the horses, because I felt like going for a ride. And I had this, like Jillian said, pretty untethered, unsupervised / neglected experience. I could just leave, and they wouldn't ask for me. If I say I'm going riding, they wouldn't check until, maybe after dark, possibly. But also, we didn't have ATVs. There was no, really, we're pretty poor. So go find the horses means I go walk, for hours in the hills looking for them. My dad had this, super, like what you think of this supernatural native sense of, where things are. And I didn't. I was just like walking. Some days I'd be so frustrated because I couldn't find them, and in hindsight, and then if I did find them, of course I would, if I was lucky, I brought like a piece of twine or something, to catch one. And some days I didn't, and they left, and I'd be like crying, and walking for more hours. But in hindsight, that experience. And then of course, if I did catch one, I still have this, one of the most best feelings ever is to do that walking, that journey, and then you find your horse and they do invite you to get on, and then you can bring the whole herd back. And we had probably 50 horses or something, and could bring them all back. And it's like, yay, and but we're talking about the land and relationship, and it's kind of like the things happen between the beats and between the words and between the perceptions. So all of that time, what I thought I was doing, was my young experience. But in the meantime, I was in relationship with the land all the time, and I always slept out. I slept outside a lot, not in the winter, but in the summer I slept outside a lot and with my dog. And that's ironically, that is if I reflect on what are the safest moments, the moments that I felt most safe and comforted and protected are those times when I was way out there by myself, or sleeping on top of a hill by myself with my dog. And I feel like it's just, there's at a certain point you slip into a different kind of existence where you just don't, the modern world, and I probably can't express this well, but the things that we concern ourselves with on a daily basis just don't really matter. They just kind of disappear. And we talk about being in the moment. It's that, and also just a shift of like things that I think are big are just not that big. When you sleep under the stars, or when I slept under the stars, there came a point where I felt like so tiny, but not insignificant, but just so tiny that like, really, what drama I have at school, really, like, it's just not, there's just such a larger and more beautiful existence of things. And even in life and death, like, people are so worried about mountain lions all the time. It's like my personal pet peeve is like, the mountain lions have such a bad rap. I'm like, I don't see them, rushing to attack anybody very much, but even if they did, the larger beautiful world and all that I'm seeing, and feeling and smelling, and the trees, the pines, and the buttes, it's all still good and beautiful. If I should leave this world for now, it's all still good and beautiful, so there's just really a beautiful comfort that I would experience sometimes. And I do still experience that sometimes. And I just hope that more people can, because I think it is sad how a lot of people are fearful of nature, and they're, don't go outside and don't go out in the dark and watch out for the mountain lions. And I just feel a lot more comforted out there than I do with a lot of people. No offense to you all. You all are super comforting. But generally speaking, I hope more people can experience that, those kinds of moments. Sorry, I don't know if I answered any questions, but those are things that came up for me.
That's just amazing, Jessica. You're referring to feeling really comfortable out in the wilderness, and I'm the same way. Being with the grizzly bears and the mountain lions and the coyotes, and that's where I love to be, and it feels a lot better than possibly being in a large city in a elevator with a bunch of people crammed in together. Anyway, I wanted to bring together what you've all been brought up so wonderfully, the thoroughbreds and the knowing ourselves and the risk and relationship. There was this little thoroughbred. I've had lots of thoroughbreds in my life that are just touched my heart really deeply. And one was this little thoroughbred. Her name was Vega. And my friend had invited my daughters and I to go to an auction. This was probably 30 years ago. And so I went with her just to make her happy. So we went to the auction, and there was this thoroughbred with this velvet plush black coat in the small little auction area. And they, the guy was saying how a wonderful horse she was. And my daughter had viewed the horses in all their pens beforehand. And she had said, "Mom, I want that one." And it was this little black thoroughbred. So the thoroughbred come up. Anyways, we went through the whole bidding process and we got her. And we went back to the pen afterwards, and this big man came up to us, and he said, "So this horse isn't for your kid, is it?" And I looked at him and I said, "Well, we don't know. We'll see how it goes." And he said, "Because this isn't a kid's horse. She was a racehorse. We took her to the track to get started, and she was in the stall, and they couldn't get her out of the stall. She would beat the people with her hooves. And so she's not a kid's horse." So talking about risk and relationship. So we took this little horse, and the reason why she was so little, because she was she was like so small. She was one of two horses, and the other one died. Anyway, we took her home, and Vega grew to be the most amazing, quirky girl you could imagine. My daughter rode her in what we call jump night, our neighborhood jump night, over, these very agile courses, and she would always make it happen for my little daughter sitting on top of her. So although she may be perceived as what could be a risky horse for a child, the two of them knew each other inside out, and they could do these jump courses on a dime, and the horse and the child loved it. That horse absolutely loved it. So I find that a lot of what I teach is relating to, of course, we have to be more aware of ourselves. That's where it all starts. But there's this play aspect that comes in that children and horses teach us. As we grow older, we forget about it. But that intense play, and I don't mean playing games, I mean the attitude that we come to the horse with play. It's a play attitude that we come with, an attitude that we can pivot, we can change, right? We can have something in our mind that we want to happen, but if we embody it and the horse doesn't parallel our embodiment, what does it matter? Right? We can pivot, we can go another way, we can change, we can come out with brilliance because we have been open-minded and we know ourselves enough to be able to do that process effectively. And another thing is that it's really important for us when we're talking about fear in relationship is to understand how the horse perceives our influence. Always it's the other way around, but I like to view it. How does the horse perceive us? How does the horse perceive what influence we are presenting? And in that way, it all comes down to energy. It all comes down to guiding energy. So when we're riding a half pass across the diagonal, for example, yes, we are moving with a physical body, but we're guiding the energy between us and that horse's body to be able to do that. So we both embody the same movement. So risk relationship is, I've gone on another tangent completely, which is what I love is movement with horses, right? And how do humans accomplish that in a way that's not asking or demanding? And just back to that thoroughbred Vega who's passed away now, and my daughter, that was a clear example of what could have been a risky situation and revolved and was presented to us with a lot of fear, but trusting the universe, trusting the childlike play that we can incorporate with our horses and ourselves, and honoring ourselves and the universe around us and the energy that is there that we can draw upon, rather than becoming fear-based, rather than seeing it as a risk, see it as an opportunity for growth.
How do we each receive the nourishment? Because Chris, I'm with you 1,000%. And I know you have a unique history that tuned you into energy at those levels, right? And you also have developed your capacity to use words around it. And what we're pointing to, what we're using words for, is the place of no words, which is ironic and delicious in and of itself. I'm just really aware there's so many people like going, yes, I get that. So maybe what I'm curious about then is like, what is it that lets us open up? Like, how do we find those tender places in ourselves that we let ourselves feel the land? Because, you know, in this conditioned culture, there is a lot of discomfort, and it makes a whole lot of sense that a lot of people don't want to open up, right? And they don't necessarily, they'll explore, you know, and more people than ever are exploring intuitive awareness, exploring energy, exploring connection. And yet there are still governors at the energetic level that say, okay, I'll explore it to here, but not past that. And it's honestly probably not very conscious, you know, how much we'll let ourselves open up or not, right? There's, to me, what's so valuable is exploring, like, and I make myself cry with this, but who am I if I hold no judgment for humanity and the way humanity treats the land and the way humanity treats the horses? What happens if I experiment with being available to connect with non-human life without judging humans? Can I do it? What happens? What changes? This to me is a very valuable exploration, you know, because we can say self-awareness all day long, but it can be self-awareness as long as I don't have to go to the mall, right? Self-awareness as long as you don't talk to me about politics. Self-awareness as long as I'm, you know, in a herd of horses. And I bring this up because it's been very much my own journey. Like, how do I be on this planet if I'm not judging humans? Because I kept realizing, you know, I would, every time I looked in the mirror, there was a human there. And, you know, if I'm getting busy hating humans, then wait a minute, there's one that's looking back at me all the time. And it just didn't make sense that I could be a contribution in the way that my heart wanted to be if I were governed by my rejection of humans. So I know we each have our own journey with that as well. And to any extent that you're willing to share a story or an experience or an awareness, even if it is, you know, might be very true to say, oh no, I hate humans. That's it. No, I don't go to the mall. I mean, that's pretty common, especially among people who are really opening to their empathic clarity and their intuitive clarity. But, you know, to whatever extent we're each available, how do you navigate it? How does the land contribute to not being at risk with yourself and your own judgments?
I think I love this topic. I think, you know, when we talk about energy and when we talk about being in tune with the land, there's that part of us that worries that we'll be painted with the brush of being irrational, right? In a rational world, in a colonized world that's so, relies on rationality. And I think you can move that context around, because we talked about going to the place without words. Well, what are words, right? Words or sounds is, we shapeshift just by speaking, right? We change air, we change it into a vibration in this really sophisticated way. That's energy work right there. Speech is energy work. And we haven't even talked about singing, for God's sake, right? And why is singing so important? Why do we love rhythm? Because the earth is giving us a rhythm. And when we find that one, when we find that downbeat, it feels like home. And it's why time signatures in music are similar all over the planet. It's why our animals will respond to rhythm, possibly different rhythms, because they're tuned in. So maybe we are the most rational. And instead of going to the mall, just recognizing that we constantly shape energy in everything we do. So we know your intention shapes energy. I was talking to my husband the other day, and there is no English term for déjà vu, right? Because we don't need one, because everybody in the world knows what that feels like. Well, what does that mean? Maybe, just this notion of a quantum world where everything's fractal is just completely legit, and it is rational, where the rational becomes, or the irrational becomes the rational. And so, and I think we're moving towards that place to understand that what we currently see as irrational is spectacularly rational. And I'm just excited to be on that part of the journey and not going to the mall. But that's all I have to say about that.
I would love to share what's bubbling up, because for me, what's been really supportive for me is actually to be mentored by the earth body in processing the resistance within me to humanity and the aspects of human nature that are oriented to destruction and extraction and violence. And as opposed to denying it or kind of pushing it away or ignoring it, it's how does the earth body kind of work with that kind of energy in and of itself? And I think that's why it's by kind of the design of my soul contract that I was pulled to a country to live alongside active volcanoes for 7 years, and to literally be with kind of the destructive agent that is responsible for reshaping landscapes for millennia, like has millennia intelligence in its destructive forces and its rebirth forces. And so it's helped me a lot to be close to eruptive volcanoes, to feel the longevity of energy that does change a landscape, and acknowledge that humans are one of these energetic forces on the earth. Whether we like and want to judge the way in which it's manifesting, what's interesting is that we also have this other capacity to participate in the landscape in a really generative way. And that's where being with trees has really supported me and again, I'm really blessed to be mentored by ancients like that have been breathing for 2,000 years. The Alerces here have been breathing some almost up to 3,000 years. And to be with beings that have been watching us and just witnessing and sharing breath, that has supported me in finding that capacity of generosity in my being, of being able to witness us, you know, from a space that can be neutral, as you said, Carrie, that can be wholehearted in its surrender to what is, as opposed to the kind of resistance to it, you know? And again, not making it right or wrong, or using, if I am in that judgment, that the other word that was coming up for me, and this relates to the whole thing, to the movement with the horses, the trust when we're close to risk, the sleeping with the mountain lions, which I sleep alongside pumas, and I honor it, because again, it comes down to trust or distrust. And when we are aware of where distrust pops up in us, that's what we have to start to tend to, so that we can come back into that space of trust that is life, you know, that is in nature. You know, the flowers bloom with the trust that they'll bloom, and then they're going to go through their death cycle. We all go through the same cycle, but humans, we kind of resist it in our minds. So, yeah.
Greta, your words are so beautiful, and I'm sitting here and I'm just thinking, I'm learning so much from all of you. You know, your experiences and your introspection and the stories that you're sharing. And as I listen, I'm tapping into my own areas of awareness in terms of where my own personal growth needs to flourish. Because I find that I don't trust in human beings sometimes. It's kind of a joke here. We live in the hill country of Texas, and it's becoming, you know, a very popular destination for people from all over the United States to move to and to build. And it's a very delicate and fragile ecosystem, and we just simply don't have enough water. And all I see around me are people selling their land for instant gratification, and more straws going into the aquifers. And for the first time in our recorded history, the Guadalupe River went dry. And that houses the old ancient cypress trees. And the joke is Casey won't let me leave the property because I get so angry. And when I scratch beneath the surface of that, it's masking great sadness. And in that great sadness, I think about what Carrie said, and I look in the mirror. It's the distrust of humans. And I look in the mirror and I'm one of those humans. And so then I feel guilt, because I know that I am also a part of that. But I also know that even amongst the negativity, I'm reminded of all the beauty that human beings are also capable of. And I try to reconcile that by finding balance in my love and my distrust and in my trust for human beings. And I want to deeply trust that there will be an awakening to the rhythms of nature, and a remembering, a deep soulful remembering that humans could have and embrace and love. And so I do struggle. I struggle with my judgment. I struggle with my deep sadness that's covered up by anger and my mistrust. And yet I do still see little flickers of hope. And whether you believe in reincarnation or not, I just feel like so many times in my cycle through this great grand universe is that I've seen my land taken often. And I don't always feel, you know, that I have control over that. I don't have control over. We don't have control over anything. But so what can I do in the present moment? I can continue through my own energetic and mental vibration to hold space, to wrap in light, to go to the Guadalupe and sit with the ancient cypress. You know, I can find regeneration in those spaces. But currently, truth for the moment now is I do struggle with that balance, and that is as honest as I can be about it. It hurts.
Yeah, it's true. It does hurt, Jillian, and it really hurts deep. And Carrie, you asked the question, what are we if we don't have judgment on other human beings? What are we? Who are we? And it's so difficult when we see like our land being taken, or these political and social dynamics that are happening where people don't set aside egos and instead feel attacked or feel confused. And there's no hint of letting go. There's no hint of being vulnerable like Jillian just was. And it's because no one feels, or not no one, but people just don't feel safe enough to be vulnerable enough to allow the union of people, or the union of a person and another animal, like a horse, like horses do. They do that. So yeah, how do we solve this? How do we solve humanity? And the treatment of animals? For me personally, I also have been healed and helped by the earth energy and the mountains and the Altamasiacs and the Apus of Peru, as I studied shamanism for over 10 years, and the mountains that I live in. And in fact, the trees also, like Greta was talking about, people say, where are you going to put your house? I said, well, I'm going to put my house, there's a tree right here, a 300-year-old tree right outside my window. I'm going to put my house right there where those trees grow, or where the strawberries first bloom in the spring. That's where I'm going to put my house, and that's where I did. It's not finished because we have horses and that. Anyway, it's a beautiful place to live. So letting go of our defenses, our resistances, opening ourselves up, that's what's going to lead us to success, if you want to call it that, in whatever we do, our careers, our mental state, our existence with other beings, our creativity, all those kinds of things. Opening ourselves up to the universe, the cosmos, the energy, those kinds of things. Because it is painful, but we have to go through that pain. And the pain that we're describing, that each of us have gone through, we've done our stuff, haven't we? Sometimes we need to go through that pain in order to come out on the other side and shapeshift as we're going through that pain, with our words, with our speaking, with our humming, with our singing, with our dancing.
Chris, thank you. We have 5, maybe 10 minutes left in our hour. And Jess, I would love to hear from you at this point too. Maybe you can bring us home. And if anyone has final words before we wrap today, this is such an exquisite conversation. Thank you all for your openness and vulnerability. But I really would love to hear from Jess at this point.
Well, thank you. So much great sharing. I really love your highlighting this concept of a lot of us are connected at a certain level, and then there's like a governor past which it's like a no-go zone or something as far as reconnecting. And you know, I was fortunate enough to kind of grow up that way, um and that is really my prayer, and that is my moments of sadness, because I'm, you know, in our community there's still a lot of eminent trauma, historical trauma that's not so historical. So there's still a lot of eminent trauma and people that are really just in survival mode. We talk a lot about polyvagal and all the things, and I'm surrounded by a community where a lot of people are still struggling with survival mode. And you don't really talk about enlightenment and deep spiritual energetic connection with something when you are still really struggling with survival. And so for me, that's at times it's hard, but really I'm trying to think of how you said how we can manifest more of that opening, kind of loosening of the governor at the same time, right? Many things can be true at the same time. At the same time, I feel that and I pray for it, and I try to see it and manifest it for all of our relatives. And at the same time, I know that I really have no control over these matters. And it's a matter of patience, and that healing takes place, and the earth is always in a process of shifting, and you know, like she shared, destruction and healing, and as are we. And those cycles are going to happen, and our people, with, you know, speaking of indigenous people, but people all around the world have had horrible experiences, and then there's waves of healing, um and I'm just a little tiny bit that's here, and what's going to happen is going to happen, and I choose, or I've been blessed with some crazy optimism that it's going to be, you know, it's going to be okay. And I just need to pay attention to my own energy, my relationship with my husband. Just feel, I love what you said too about feeling, what is it that feeds you, you know, the great love that we can derive by connecting with others, whether it's horses, the land, or children. You know, continue to feed my spirit that way, do what I can, but also trust that, you know, I don't have much control of things, but it's going to be okay. That's my little experience anyway.
Thank you, Jess. I'm on the verge of tears through most of this because it's just so beautiful. The wisdom and the openness that you're all sharing, it just touches my heart so deeply. So thank you all very much. We're in literally the final couple minutes here, but would anybody have anything else to say, anything to wrap up, or anything that any more curiosity that's opened now, or more inspiration through our conversation? I don't know, I'm just like tossing spaghetti for a second here.
I feel inspired.
Mm.
And I'm grateful for the opportunity to learn from each and all of you. And thank you everybody for just being beautiful. See, that restores me in the human condition.
Yeah, I'm just feeling all of you in my heart, and I'm feeling that that's kind of to touch on what you had shared. Like, I've got a well of grief and joy flows through it, and it's kind of these spaces where I can feel your hearts that's kind of activating that joy that moves what has to be in the well of grief. So I appreciate all of you and your hearts and your spirits and the way in which you take up space in the world, on the earth. So thank you.
I just want to call out something, Greta, you said before we started recording that I just had to write down. you said that you were in a committed relationship with the unknown, and I have been thinking about that this entire time. So thank you for that beautiful little gem. And I love the way you know, I figured it was a committed relationship that took you away from Pennsylvania to where you are. And anyway, that was lovely. And thank you for that little gem, something to think about. And I think it just kind of wraps up this notion of perceived risk or actual risk in such a cool way. So but thank you, everyone. What a treat to spend time with this group.
Thank you, everyone. I just want to say thank you. It's been really, you know, one of the highest forms of interaction with others is what we've just done here for the last hour. So very special. Thank you.
Thank you. And Joelle, thank you for bringing us back full circle to this idea of risk and the unknown. Because I think for many people, the relationship with the unknown is that it's the ultimate risk. When really, when you embrace the unknown, it's now known. It just feels different than control. And I absolutely love that dance. I love the dance of that conversation. So thank you. And you're all so fantastic. Thank you for sharing so much, everybody.
Thank you.